everybody. Thank you guys for tuning in. Sitting on a nice warm balcony in Pasadena with Joanna Roche, and I'm thankful to have her here. Cheers. This is the third installment of Trees Talk, so thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
And I think some of you may have been present for Joanna's amazing reading of her new book. And I mean, we're going to talk about lots of things, but definitely I would love to hear about, how the book developed and, however you want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, thank you again for inviting me and for getting my butt in gear, because the project was really something that was just a kind of accumulation of poems in a folder on my desktop.
Yeah.
And I had published one other chapbook, Tyrannical Angels, it was about 10 or 12 years ago now, and I don't know, there was just, I think it was in conversation with you where we talked about doing something collaboratively.
Which we are going to do.
Which we are,
yes.
Which we are, and so you were kind of the beginning of this second project, which it didn't exactly languish, but it took the back seat. And
right.
So I think I was encouraged by a friend, Laura Black, who did the wonderful layout and design work on this book, which is up in Blurb, and on ebook for like $1, but you can buy it as a hardcover too. But she was very kind in offering to do the design, so we got that almost, probably 90% done. Joanna Grasso, another good friend, recommended Caroline Maxwell, whom I did not know, but is a wonderful artist whose pen and ink drawings for the sake of easy reproduction included.
Yeah.
So basically, the project started with you, Joe, and then, about a month ago when you said, would I like to do a reading, I was like, I don't have a book. And so that led me
So you made one.
Right, that led me to push my friend Laura, who then wrapped up her edits and we got it out. So.
Well, I mean, I think, one of the things I was thinking about that was the fact, the idea that I think there's misunderstandings. I think poetry maybe in writing have more misunderstandings than art even in the popular culture sometimes. And one of the things I think is that, I think I used to think this, that poets sit around and write in a very like ivory tower situation, hermetically. Mm-hmm. And I think that can be true. But I was thinking about Dante and Guido Cavalcanti, these medieval poets, who I really love them. And a lot of the poems, a lot of the short, not the Divine Comedy obviously, but a lot of the short sonnets by both of them, because Guido was Dante's mentor in Florence. Yeah. Anyway, I mean, many of those sonnets that you read from that period are basically notes to each other.
Oh, how lovely.
And so I guess the reason I mention it is that it's like this practical communication that's not based on, oh, I'm going to publish it or I'm making this for posterity. It's just like I'm living my life. And so like I'm honored to be part of the process, but I mean, that's just how things get made. Is from practical everyday and pressures. Like I'm like, oh yeah, this person wants this thing. So much culture is made in that furnace of practicality. It to is. Me, and I don't think I for some reason art history. I mean, maybe this is something we could talk about too. Art history seems to A, clean that up, or B, falsely mythologize it into something like grandiose that isn't true. Why is that?
Art history.
I love. By the way, I love art history. I'm also a double major. I was a major, so I'm a fan.
Yeah, I sometimes have ambivalence about calling myself an art historian. I think of myself as the haiku art historian because I love the short form, and in fact, my poetry is really, in a sense, a product of finding time in between extensive amounts of email and. Well,
you and Frank O'Hara, you're in good company.
Yeah, that's nice to know. I don't know if I'm ready to tackle the art history, except that I think it's very important to. The materiality of teaching art history, at least, is we look at the finished object, but there is so much more. Yeah. And I noticed in rereading chapbook that I use the word expand a lot, and I think expanding behind the image, behind the finished artwork, and in a sense that's what I enjoy about art history is, what was the social vision like at the time, what was the kind of mindset of people, and those are ineffable sometimes. It's hard to get at, but I do think for me the poetic process, if you will, comes from often looking at art. For me,
is it mean in terms of subjects for poems or
ideas? So sometimes I'm someone who has a very erratic and undisciplined poetic writing schedule. It's really when I have my socks blown off, basically. So I find.
What do you mean your socks blown off?
Well, just I'm an experience that.
I see.
Yeah.
Right.
So often I included it in the first chapbook, Tyrannical Angels, but there was a very small. It was sort of Bosch-like, but it wasn't exactly Bosch, but it was a medieval manuscript at the Getty a million years ago, and that prompted me to write a poem about Tondal and the kind of the form of that. And
I don't know what that is. Could you? Tondal.
Tondal. He was a medieval character who was kind of a pilgrim in a way. So I think I can recite it, but
I'm not going to make you.
Yeah.
It's optional.
It's in the other book, but but that and then the opening poem of this book.
Do you want to read it?
Sure. This one was inspired by a pair of statues at the Norton Simon that I always visit after I go with my class, and it's called Across the Aisle. I miss you, Avalokiteshvara. What signal were you flashing me in the green corridors of the Norton Simon? What mudra of "you make me crazy" could I ever come up with that would put me back in time? Your bronze butt facing me all these many years. We posed on the wooden stage of never leaving. Did you know the hole in your lost wax head would be so large? I was birthed before you and from no man's head, but we joined in our minds, touched in time. So that's a much older one, and this
beautiful poem.
Thank you. The breakdown, then.now.if, kind of came in part from thinking of our relationship to time and the past, the present, the future, kind of the thread between those. So the chapbook is broken down into sort of these three small sections, and that one I started out with partly because it was a much older poem, but also because it was part of the suite of love poems from the first book. But,
so you consider that a love poem, really?
Yeah. It's sort of an ode to a relationship, but an ode to experiencing art, and in the low level of the Norton Simon with all the Indian art and Hindu art. There's Tara and Avalokiteshvara facing each other.
Oh yeah, I see.
It's a sort of wonderful spot that, and again, I really haven't studied much Hindu art. I really know, in some ways I write more about the art that I know nothing about.
Right. Is that intentional, or does it just happen that way?
I think sometimes my art historian's brain is turned off.
But you have written about Cornell, though.
I have, and Rodin in one poem, but I love those moments where I'm looking at art that I really don't have a lot of deep historical knowledge about, but I can appreciate, and so that prompts it. So so some of the poems are come out of direct experience of art, others of
I am actually, if you don't mind me asking, about technical stuff or stylistic stuff. Well, I mean, I guess I'm curious how your way of, I don't want to put you in a box or anything, but I mean, I read a lot of poetry, so and I see you in not a lane, but in a certain tradition. Frank, a sort of prose-ish, conversational, but very internalized and emotional, and layered. Like, one of the things that I like about your work, that I also like about O'Hara's work, and it's different. You guys are very different. But,
I have to read more O'Hara. You mentioned him, and I know him some. But
Well, I mean, one of the things that I like about both your work, for me, is that they both are inward and outward simultaneously, which is what I also like about Joyce, particularly Ulysses.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way of putting it.
Yeah, and so, and I may or may not be by design, but it makes the work about the world, but also anchors a personal point of view, which is very relatable. So that double combination is it's appealing, but also it's not like gum that wears out. It actually lasts. And you call yourself a short form person, but I don't think your work functions like haiku in that way, which I love, by the way. But your work has a sort of afterburn, emotional to me. That's
lovely. I mean, it's not like haiku in the sense that it has a certain number of syllables and it's not meted.
What I was going to ask you though was if the way you write was always that way, or if it developed, or if it came from any training, or is it all just the way you do it? I'm just curious.
It's an interesting question. I mean, I think what I remember from my earliest writing was that I found it very difficult to insert the first person. And maybe that was, a deep commentary on myself as an adolescent and sort of a negation of ego, as we might say, as a more developed mindset. But I couldn't tell stories from the point of view of an I. I was very uncomfortable with that.
Were you wanting to but couldn't, or were you just not wanting to?
I didn't. I could look at nature or look at something that struck me, but I had either a fight or a dance, I'm not sure which, with my relationship to what I saw.
I see.
And so I later recognized that perhaps what my strength was in looking very closely at things, at details, and sort of expanding them with their symbolic meaning. I have a deep love of symbols and symbolic thinking, and then that combination didn't require me to be inserted.
Right.
I think I learned about the self from teaching in a way.
Right.
And maybe it's from being an introvert for most of my childhood and adolescence, but I just remember writing and describing like it was a part of the lawn, right, in my backyard, and it was the shade, and there was a rock, and I was sort of absent from the scene, and so when I began, probably more in high school and college, writing poems intermittently, and it's always been an
That's when you began?
practice. It was again about experience, but I wasn't included except as someone looking.
Right.
So
that's very so a follow-up question I have was, were you exposed to poetry at that time and made you want to do it, or did you just write as a sort of not learned experience, but just that was just a natural thing to express yourself, or was it a combination?
Well, I was very fortunate in that my mother was an amazing reader and also a wonderful artist. Not a professional artist, but someone who always brought poetry and art into my life. And like her, I don't think I have the volume, but it was a volume of Emily Dickinson, and she said, for Joanna, who was like a lyrical poem herself.
Really?
And so it was such a touching inscription.
That's
and
amazing.
it took me a while to get into
Dickinson. But
I adore her.
Amazing.
She is.
I mean, it's funny. Every time I have conversations like this now, I forgot my sketchbooks over on that. I'm not going to get it, but I need to get some Emily Dickinson because I threw all my books away.
I need to get some Emily Dickinson too. And in fact, the kind of twin poles of my high school reading were Dickinson and Walt Whitman. So the super lengthy, containing multitudes, which I see that phrase everywhere now in that New Inn book we mentioned, who annoyed me deeply because he was so full of the I. And
Whitman did.
Yes, Whitman. My response to him when we read Song of Myself was, just shut up already, right?
Do you know Ezra Pound's poem to Walt Whitman?
I think I read it.
It's called, I don't remember, he says something, it's called a pact. He says, I make a pact with you, Walt, and then I've despised you long enough. But it is really cool because he recognizes that without, he really allowed Pound to do what he did. I have my Pound on the book. I was just reading it last night. It's really funny that we're talking about it.
I will borrow that from you.
Of course, I'm trying to figure out how to square the fact that he was a fascist with the fact that I love him.
I know.
It's tricky.
There are several like him that are problematic that way. But high school, Whitman was too full of himself.
Right.
which kind of corresponds to
when did that change?
at college. Alan Grossman, the amazing poet. We took a class just on Whitman.
Ooh,
and
I would like to take that class.
Intense. A semester of just reading Whitman.
Did you resist him at first, though, or did you like him again right away?
It changed. It changed for me, and in fact, partly it was Alan Grossman, and partly it was just going deeper into Whitman. And I think I was such an undisciplined writer in college, but writing a poem on, when lilacs last and the dooryard bloomed, and I remember thinking deeply about the thrush and the...
You wrote a poem about that?
I wrote a paper.
Okay.
I was going to do grad school in literature, but I was like, I love it too much to study it that way.
Yeah.
But then Dickinson was like the other opposite, so succinct, and she and Cornell, it's a stewing process to me, that the Cornell and Dickinson, I think... I have a poem on Ode to the Lost Outline, but I have written so many books in my head about Cornell and a few short articles. But
what is it about him? I mean, I'm not trying to get you to sum it up in a catchphrase. But.
I think it is that he is very succinct, like Dickinson, and that he is deeply poetic.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think something about... And
what
maybe it's more fun as a book than a mind book than as a real book, but something about poetry and Cornell together.
I think it sounds like a good book, Joanna.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm so attached to the short form
of
poetry.
Have you thought about doing do you know, before I got really depressed, I was starting to get to know some younger writers, essayists, and there's a woman, and I'm unfortunately, if she's listening, I don't think she is, but Eula Bliss is her name. And I came across one of her, I don't even know what to call it. It's an essay technically, but it's a poetic essay, and it's really this new form. Oh, it's not new anymore.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like a poem, but then it's like an essay.
A fourth form.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, and it was amazing. And I got in touch with her and traded her a drawing for her book, which then I threw away when I was depressed, and I threw all my books away. So, it's nothing personal.
There's a poem in that reading.
I'm going to get that book again.
Poem and Joe throwing away his books.
in the dumpster behind my place.
I know.
Some homeless people took some.
Yeah.
So somewhere somebody's reading Benjamin's arcade projects.
A glorious conflagration of Joe's past.
Oh my God!
No, I think new forms. I'm very.
But so I was wondering. Yeah. I mean, could you make a thing about Cornell in fragments?
I think so. I mean, this poem was kind of a bit like that, and I really did lose an outline. I had what I thought was the book outline, and I did something stupid or was, had too much caffeine or too much wine, and I deleted it. And so.
But what if the outline is the book?
Well, yeah, the poem became the replacement for the book, and so I think in some ways.
Have you read the Arcades, the Benjamin Arcades?
I have.
So, I mean, that he didn't intend that to be that.
Yeah.
You know the story about that, right?
Tell me again.
Okay, so Walter Benjamin, Benjamin, whatever you say it, was. Gershom Scholem, who was a writer on the Kabbalah, desperately tried to get him to emigrate to Israel in the 30s. He's like, right. Dude, this shit's coming. Come on, man. And he wouldn't do it because he loved German culture, kind of like my family. It's really weird. Anyway, so of course the shit hit the fan, and he was trying desperately to get out of France.
He was on the border.
He was on the border of Spain, and he somehow had this impression that he wasn't going to make it. And he killed himself with an overdose of morphine. What a weird way to do it. And then he got his transit papers the next day. And his whole Arcades project was in his suit. I
had forgotten it was with him at the time.
It was in a suitcase. And I don't know who it was that took it, but just like the image. Like, I've actually made a bunch of drawings with a suitcase with papers flying around because in kind of homage to him. Because that image is very heartbreaking, but very beautiful.
Very beautiful.
Anyway, but I mean... That was basically his notes for the book that he was going to write. And he had kept those notes for 20 years or whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, it really is a beautiful collection to read.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
I love the idea of something thinking it should be one thing and, right as
well, I also think about Cornell keeping all his little things in his garage in little categorical boxes of so in a way...
Yeah, it's a shoebox. I got to visit the Cornell Study Center
I've never
at the
done that.
Smithsonian before it kind of got moved into largely archival,
Okay.
hands-off region. But yeah, it was surrounded by kind of a studio atmosphere with little boxes. No, there's, now it's become a deadline since it wasn't something I had to do for tenure, but it's become a post-retirement project. But
Right.
in the meantime, the poetry is
Yeah.
a way of condensing a lot of inspirations and thoughts into something. That's why I call it short form, kind of tight and condensed. And I had one really amazing. He was actually a mythology professor at Brandeis who said, "Your paragraphs, what did he say? Your sentences are like paragraphs, and so you have to expand it and open it up. And academic writing is more about explaining, and and I just was like, no, that's not really my form. It was always very dense. So
That's interesting. But your work doesn't feel heavy though. To me,
no,
I don't know.
I write it with an ear to being heard.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So it's
That makes sense.
yeah, it's so fun to talk about it, and I think it was more of a kind of like when I took up beading and making earrings. It was when I was writing my dissertation. I just wanted something that I could finish and have in my hand at the end of the day. So I started threading beads, and I realized, oh, that's the dissertation. It's just one bead of words after another, obviously with a big concept and all that. But yeah, I think I am a terrible procrastinator, and I have a paralysis of perfectionism, which my father dubbed.
Well, what Borges said about himself. He said the reason he was into the short form was that he was lazy. He just said that.
But he wrote a lot of it.
I know, but I know. I'm just saying. I mean, it doesn't really matter what I think. It's more about you. But I really don't think there's a bad motivation for making. I can't remember who was it said that. Somebody said. I remember that quote from school. And there's
not a bad motivation for making.
Not even, and I guess maybe there are some exceptions, like if you hurt people or whatever. But aside from that, I don't think so. Laziness or ill will is as good of a motivation as anything. And I always think about Bob Dylan songs. His "fuck you" songs are the best ones.
Yeah,
they're not the best ones, but they are amazing.
Yeah.
And they're not very kind. That's pretty sure.
I don't have much of that "fuck you."
No, I don't.
Motivation,
I'm not.
but
you don't. No, you definitely don't.
Yeah.
No,
I
but
have to write from a place of awe, I guess, to put it.
Well, the thing I like about your poems, though, it's interesting in relation to what you said, is that they really feel like objects to me. Maybe that's the difference between academic writing and your poems, or a difference, because they.
Ah, that's lovely. Thank you. I do think objects as symbols, or objects as symbols as emotions and experience.
Well, but they almost feel like sculptures. Is more what I mean. It's like they exist as they have a kind of. I'm not sure what the word is. They're kind of chunky.
Outline. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're more chunky. I don't know, that's not a very good word, but it is descriptive.
Yeah.
They don't feel they do take place in your head because any text does, but they feel visceral. But that word also implies a kind of hard on your sleeve kind of gooiness, and they're not. They can be gooey actually, a little bit. Now I think about it, which I really like too.
Do you? Yeah, I think.
I think
each one is its own sort of encapsulated experience, and I think of them as very distilled. But I'm glad that they actually have a gooiness to it, and to kind of
so
layering.
when you say distilled, it sounds like in your mind you think that also means that they're detached.
No, more just boiled down to.
Oh, okay.
So I'm a terrible cook, in part because I multitask doing other more interesting things than watching what I'm cooking.
I see.
So I burn a lot of stuff, and I end up with a lot of very dense liquids, right? So it's kind of like that in the poetry. Not that that's my process, but I feel, at least reading back on them, it's sort of a distilled experience, and a sort of the drip, right?
That's interesting. Well, it's that old thing of sometimes the poet or artist feels like they're the best authority on their work, and sometimes it feels like they're the most clueless. I'm just
you've
thinking
said more interesting things about my work than I've thought about in years.
I'm sure that's not entirely true.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, well, hey, when you're a fan, you get to think. You can think a lot about it.
Yeah.
You know, but
So, what do you think about? There's a lot of poetry happening now. There's
Yeah.
always been a lot, but
Well,
going gallery hopping yesterday.
not like now.
There's a lot.
Oh no, I mean poetry is like hit a mainstream, and I use the word and not in a judgmental way, but it's hit a mainstream audience.
Yeah. Why do you think?
Well, I have no idea. I mean, or I have ideas, but I don't know if they're right. I think there's a number of things. I think rap and hip hop are a huge reason.
That was my thought.
I don't know if that's true, but it occurs to me that is partially true.
It's a widely admired form.
Yeah,
Rap and hip hop and
I mean, I remember back in the '90s, the first time I ever heard NWA and what's the other group? I can't remember now. But I mean, it was kind of shocking to hear music that is, I mean,
Spoken?
well, lyric driven more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, there's always bands that I love their lyrics, like Pink Floyd or
Yeah.
Radiohead or whatever, you know. But it's really different when the actual musicality is coming from the rhythm of the text.
Right.
But that's an old. I mean, but then I thought about Borges's lecture about epic poetry, one of his Norton lectures, where he talks about that, and John Cage talks about this, that epic poems were sung when they were recited.
Yeah.
They were not just recited.
Yeah.
Apparently, I don't know. I'm not a scholar, but
Yeah.
so I mean, in some ways, it just feels like. I actually think poetry, in the sense of words and speaking, was far more known as an art form than painting or sculpture, because I mean, it was all in the church, and you know, the audience for, like, you know, Renaissance and medieval art is not that different than today. Super elitist and small. You know, people talk about wanting art to be for the people.
Yeah.
It rarely has ever been historically.
What's on the street? The murals. The
Right.
graffiti.
Well, yeah. So now that is getting. I don't think it's actually an accident that poetry and graffiti have become popular art forms.
Yes.
That are now institutionalized, which is also a weird problem too. So, but I also think that poetry is. I think now that social media is what it is, many things that it is, but one of the things that it is that, you know, it's the thing that I think a lot of our colleagues lament, the fact that everybody thinks they're an artist. Or I've heard a lot of people say everybody thinks they're a photographer, and I actually think it's bullshit. I think everybody is a photographer and an artist. And I have discovered. I mean, you know, the idea that you need training to make something good is absurd.
Yeah,
it never has been true. It doesn't hurt. I mean, it can help.
I think break down the walls and encourage everyone to find a voice that is theirs, and in a form that's theirs. And just to say, you know, one form is another, but to me, you know, I'd love to crochet, but I don't. But that would be an amazing art form. To do that, and crochet bombing, you know, yarn bombing.
Right.
You know, I love the combination of particularity and skill with something that's absolutely not canonized or codified or within an institution.
Me too.
And I think, yeah, you've hit it. I feel that poetry's tied to our voice, and the notion of we carry around the instrument of speech and song with us, and the poetic form can be as simple as a conversation. And,
oh, definitely.
You know, it doesn't even have to be printed in a book. It can be spoken and sung at a concert or on the street corner.
Well, I mean, I think that's the reason that poetry slams are really popular again. And I've never actually gone to one, you know, full confession, I was the biggest fucking snob around about poetry before my recovery. For sure. I was like, oh, you know, you need to, like, know the canon. I mean, I would think I was an oppressor. That's how I mean...
Yeah, you never come across as snobby. You just have
but I'm telling you how I felt...
encyclopedic knowledge of shit.
I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge. I want to. But I think that I fell into the... I really think that I think I was the same with art before. I mean, I'm just being honest. I don't think it means I'm a bad person, but I basically... I feel like I didn't enjoy as much. You know, Hillary and I used to argue about this all the time, and now I'm just eating my words. And like to tell her that. I'm telling you, you're right. So
you thought there was a place and time and a high and a low in a way?
I think in my heart I did. And that's the thing that makes me mad about myself, is that I walked the walk of the populist, but I was secretly an elitist. See, that's the kind of hypocrisy that I don't think is good.
You're digging deep. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I have to start digging deeper and asking if some ways.
But I don't even think it's bad to be an elitist and just own it.
Yeah.
See, I mean, there's a place for that.
I adore museums.
Me
know
too.
They're full of problems and.
Well, what isn't full of problems? That's the thing,
yeah.
right? I mean, anything created by humans is problematic. I just got into this. This is an interesting experience. I want to get back to your poetry, but I had this interesting thing with this guy on Instagram the other day. Because I went to the Stop Asian Hate rally downtown.
I saw that you had, yeah.
Which was a very moving and terrific. It was really good.
It was on Friday.
It was Saturday.
Saturday.
Yeah. Anyway, and so I posted a bunch of things, and this guy kind of made some snarky comments, and he was clearly kind of a right-wing guy. And I mean, I really gave it to him in a pretty asshole-ish way, I will admit, and he gave it back to me. But the weird thing is, then he sent a post saying, you know, I grew up in Orange County, and I struggled, and I was beaten up, and I was in prison, and something really made me feel compassion for the guy. And I sent him a message saying, I actually have compassion for you, brother.
Yeah.
And then we kind of, like, I'm sure that we don't agree again.
Yeah.
But I saw the humanity in the other side, and I'm like, I don't think that he should see it my way. And I mean, I can't even say I can judge him for, even if he's a fascist, which I don't agree with.
Yeah.
That exists. You know, if you believe in God, God made that too. I don't know, man. It's very weird.
Yeah, I think you know, we've learned from the last year how important it is to be able to try and talk to people we disagree with.
That's right.
Trump and racists and
Yeah.
you know, white supremacists and yet I think, you know, like many, I prefer to hang out with people I'm in agreement with, who I don't have to have those problematic conversations. And even on my street where I live in Westminster, there's still some Trump flags flying. And I was like, if you had real, you know, bravura, Joanna, you would go up and have a conversation with these people and ask them, why do you still have this flag flying? Why can you believe in this individual? But I don't, and I just, you know, but I do love the idea that we can engage in many more modalities now than before.
Well, I mean, I am going to go have a coffee with this guy.
Good.
I mean, seriously, I want to, and I mean, I'm not going to do it with the mindset that I want to teach him anything either.
Was he advocating for Asian hate, or
no, not at all. Yeah. No, he was definitely not. No,
okay.
but he was sort of. I can't remember the post. He was like, I used to be a super left winger. I used to love Baudrillard, and like he knows his shit. And he said, but now he's a gun-toting, you know, kind of, you know, conservative guy. And I don't think, he didn't seem to me that he was a racist. Although I did call him a racist tool. I mean, I really judged him based on his tone, which is, shame on me, actually.
See if he'll do an interview. It'd be amazing to get it on camera, but he might not want to.
Well, I think I'd like to just meet with him, just as a person.
Yeah.
You know, I was thinking, I talked about this on Brian Canfield's podcast the first time, that when I was in my horrible depression, I was just watching ridiculous amounts of YouTube, but I did see some really beautiful things that have affected my worldview, and one of which was, and now I can never remember this guy's name, but this guy whose mission is to, I guess, convert white supremacists, but he does not do it the way you think. He doesn't try and tell them what to think. He doesn't try and change them. He just gets to know them. He befriends them. And he never does groups of people. He just does one-on-one.
Wow.
And his goal is to just, he doesn't try and change them. He just talks to them and gets to know them as people, but almost every single one of them changes their worldview just from being, he's an African-American guy.
That's impressive.
And so it's the one-on-one, see, to me, that's where teaching, I think actually teaching is an important thing, and I don't mean it egotistically, but I actually think that one-to-one thing is actually how the world does change.
Yeah, I totally concur.
And, it's an ego trip to think that you could change a whole, movement. Some people can. If Gandhi could, I mean, there are people like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King who did, but I'm not that.
I am decidedly not that, and I don't even know if I'm brave enough or committed enough to find someone I deeply disagree with and have a conversation, but that's like...
Yeah, but maybe I know Woody Allen is totally out. He's not cool to talk about now. But there is a line from one of his movies that is applicable here, which is, he's in one of his movies. He's like having a fantasy where he's talking to an alien. He goes, "Shouldn't I, why am I making movies? Shouldn't I do something that's meaningful?" Like, and the alien says, "You want to do the world a favor? Tell funnier jokes."
Tell funnier jokes. Yeah.
Which I think is kind of profound, right? And it's like, so everybody plays a role, and who
Move
knows
to what your strengths are.
Yeah, I think having your lane is a good thing.
Yeah.
Not that you have to restrict yourself. But that's to come back to your poetry, that's the thing that I think that's interesting, because I don't know how many people at school know that you're a poet. I mean, I know that people we know, but...
Yeah, I don't really bring it up that much.
You don't?
I have a few students, and again, it's more through social media now, like our good friend Kat Carrier and others. So, yeah, it's a kind of, if it overlaps with people I know at school, great, but if not, I kind of stick to the lane of being a teacher and mentor and advisor.
Are you like Clark Kent? Do you kind of like the secret identity? I wouldn't mind. I could understand that. Maybe as an interesting thing.
I'm just really terrible at self-promotion.
Right.
and so, I will talk about it if someone wants to, engage about writing. And I think I've actually told a few classes that I said, I'm really not publishing very much in the field of art history, some occasional interviews and articles and essays, reviews and stuff. But to me, if I bring it up, I said I do write poetry.
Right.
So I've mentioned that as an aside, and I think it took, and I think I've read this numerous times, but everyone has a different point at which they feel comfortable saying I'm an artist or I'm a poet, and I still feel uncomfortable.
Do you?
In a way,
Wow.
I've become more comfortable, I guess, with a lot of things as we get older. We kind of recognize it's not hubris to say I'm a poet or an artist.
No.
It's more a sort of sense of being in one's skin and
Well,
realizing that you have some thoughts and things.
Well, I build you as poet and educator.
Oh, well.
In that order.
Thank you.
But I didn't do it. I just did it. It just came out that way. I mean, that's just how I think of you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's been wonderful to embrace that that writerly side, because I think that's was my desire as a child, was to be a writer, and kind of grew up thinking of that, and
really?
Art history sort of came as a surprise, sideways. I always say I sort of stumbled into it indirectly, but it's been a conjunction for me of a way to expand my looking, and then for teaching to talk about it. And so that was
I see.
an ability I wasn't sure I had. I just thought, well, I love looking at art. I love the process of writing about what I see.
Yeah.
And then as I had some experience working with artists and talking to artists, I really love writing about their work, not as a sort of me voice, not as a Greenbergian I, but as more of a kind of, listening and compiling some interesting quotes. And I don't usually write as an interview, but I incorporate a lot of quotes from the artists, and sort of a time of offering that experience to the reader, of how the artists look at their own work. And I'm just, in a sense, the conduit or the reed for it. And I know that sounds sort of, self-abnegating in a good way.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would point out that you are editing and curating the experience, so you're very much present.
True. Yeah.
You have enough tests. I don't want to over flatter you and make you embarrassed, but I mean, you are an incredible teacher, and I'm not the only one who thinks that.
Thanks.
You hear that a lot.
The Irish gift of gab, I guess. Yeah, but that was the unexpected thing in that sort of wandering journey of writing to looking to loving art to writing about art to actually talking about it, and it's such an amazing time that we're in to like whether we jettison the canon or we dip into it or we change it, but there are so many amazing artists, and I feel
There
I
are.
don't always discuss it enough in my classes, but I try to walk the walk in my own writing.
You mean you don't discuss like what's happening this minute?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really
Right.
not teaching contemporary art much anymore. I'm more in the 20th century, and,
Right.
and yet,
Maybe we can do something about that.
yeah,
We've been talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly love looking at it, and when I have an opportunity, there's an amazing artist, Lorenzo Baker, who
Oh.
I've had a couple interviews with, and just love his work, and I think
I
that's
don't know
what
his work.
prompts me. Yeah,
Yeah, I'd like to know.
have
Is
you
he
follow
local?
him. He is.
Uh-huh.
He's working out of downtown LA,
Okay.
and he's
Lorenzo Baker.
he's incredible artist, and his he also has a line of amazing clothing. And anyway, I adore his work, and I it's very important, and he's posting about
I think I followed him after seeing. Yes,
Yeah.
I know who you're talking. Yeah, he is great.
He works in digital print media, but he's now making videos. He's just incredible. So
Yeah.
I'm a little intimidated to try and find a way of writing about his work, because he's so brilliant. So I think
you can
maybe
handle
I'll
it.
do it as an interview for Carla or something.
There you go.
But it's that to me is kind of the when I'm inspired, as I am with writing a poem, to talk about an artist and to try and kind of wrap my head around what they're doing, and listen to them and make it about their words. So it's,
Sure. I want to take your class, Joanna.
Well,
I'm gonna.
you know more about modern art than.
No, I don't. I have. I mean, you mean contemporary art? A contemporary?
Well, I mean, I've been teaching more modern, and late
yeah,
19th.
Right. I see. But it's all just important. I mean, I don't know. There's also the possibility. I think actually having a class about. I don't know if it's possible, but it would be really interesting to teach a class of right now. Like that's all it's about.
Yeah.
Like you can't even make a syllabus because it just depends on who's showing for that semester. That would be a cool class.
Yeah, I do. I try to do that in seminar, where my seminar topic this spring is on change and emerging voices, and I said, you're not going to be able to do a lot of JSTOR database research on this. You're going to have to, we're all going to be thinking about what we're experiencing right now. But yeah, that would be great.
But I mean,
next spring.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of tradition. I really think the idea of the canon. I think the canon is alive. I actually not against the canon. I think it's just. I think we are.
It's an organic experience.
I think it's a pluralistic situation now. It's like the multiverse. It really is to me.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, on one hand, I discovered these. Well, and I know Vincent Desiderio. Because he's Joe Forkin and those guys know him from. He taught. I think he was a guest artist at Summer Arts. The guy is.
Yeah, you have me following him now on Instagram.
But so there's a whole amazing set of artists who are working in a really academic way. But and then you have it really is all happening all at the same time.
Yeah,
and
it's
that's
great.
so great.
We're beyond isms and is into the now, and that's interesting to think the canon is still a useful tool.
I mean, why wouldn't it be?
If it's present and always in flux, like a petri dish of canonness.
Well, do you know that? Do you know the Italo Calvino essay? Why read the classics?
You've mentioned it, yes.
I need to. I might go to Skylight and buy it today.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
Third time, in fact, I bought it. I lent my second copy to somebody. I never got it. I threw my first copy away. Third time's a charm, man.
Third time's a charm. Yeah.
But I mean, it is an amazing essay because. I'm not going to try and sum up Calvino. I'll just read it.
A Sunday reading.
Yeah.
Sunday reading. But
anyway.
I love talking about art and literature with you, and this is really optimistic because can we redefine a canon, and is the canon then? Someone once said formalism is too useful to throw away.
Well, I guess the thing about it is that, I remember seeing this documentary called, I don't remember what it's called, but it was called Storming the Citadel, and it was about the generation it was about the abstract expressionists who stormed the citadel tradition.
Right.
And then it was about also the next generation of of proto-pop artists,
Right.
Rauschenberg Johns, who basically stormed the abstract expressionist
Right.
citadel, became citadel rather quickly. It became kind of like the establishment,
Yeah.
And Robert Motherwell was the only one in that AbX. He's kind of a second generation AbX guy, but he actually wrote an essay or talked about how he recognized the irony that they were now the conservative
Right.
bastions of orthodoxy,
Yeah.
and that Roy Lichtenstein and James Rosenquist were just like beating the doors down,
Yeah.
and they couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
It happened in one generation.
Yeah, it's a
crazy.
really interesting and compressed period.
And so,
yeah,
but I mean, abstract expressionists. I mean, you can't tell me that Joan Mitchell and Jackson Pollock are dead. Those are amazing objects.
Yeah. No, it's
So I just don't know why. I actually am not sure why anything needs to be thrown away ever. I do
I love
understand.
that,
I do
yeah.
understand why Glenn Gould. I was just listening to this interview with Glenn Gould, who's one of my favorite,
I know he is,
not just
yeah.
musicians, but philosophers. He's really a philosopher, and in classical music, it's exactly the same. People are like, "Oh, Beethoven's overrated. Mozart's." This. I'm like, you're going to take down Mozart? I mean, that's like trying to say Michael Jordan's mediocre. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Like, he gives a fuck. I mean, I don't know why.
It can keep expanding. I mean, I know I keep using that word, but yeah, the
Well,
idea of not making room, but
There is
so
recognizing the
much.
room.
Yeah, there is so much that needs to be included or discussed or talked about, and I think it's sort of like the canon is like the syllabus, right? It has to keep being reworked and rethought, and I like the idea of not eliminating the notion, the concept of
Right.
the canon, because it means that there is room for everything in
Well,
it.
I
Maybe
get-
just destroying the idea of what it had been, which was an exclusionary in and out.
orthodoxy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and Gould did say that he understands among certain, and he was talking about avant-garde music, so like really, harebrained, egg-headed, like contemporary atonal music.
Difficult music.
Really, and not fun to listen to at all.
Yeah.
A lot more fun to listen to the power saw in the background, actually.
Yeah.
But he said he did understand why some groups felt the need for myopia to go forward, otherwise it was too hard. Though I don't even think I agree with that. But I mean, the idea, this whole linear avant-garde thing that started happening, and then with Romanticism,
Right.
where a movement replaces the last movement.
Right.
It's kind of like the kill of the father
Yes.
alchemical myth.
Right.
Okay, I can see that, but do we have to act like barbarians just because it was like that for thousands of years? We can change and adapt.
Yeah.
And I think the multiverse concept
I like that much
in
better.
science
Yeah.
actually allows now, like we could use it as an artistic philosophy.
So chronology exists, and yet there is an infinite number of concurrent chronologies.
Yeah, and there's also an
Yeah.
infinite number of, actually Borges wrote this great essay actually where he intuited this, where he talks about Kafka and his predecessors. Basically people in his mind for whom he was like Kafka influenced like medieval people. He didn't mean it literally, but he meant time goes both ways,
Right.
and it's just like a kinship thing. It's not about like linear like I beget. It's not like the Bible where it's so and so begets this. So I hate the fucking Old Testament because of that.
Eschatological.
It's
that was
bullshit.
one of the few vocabs from grad school. Like moving towards a trajectory. Or
I mean, like the pre-Raphaelites admired, the 14th century manuscript painters more than.
Right.
And so, like, time is just circular.
It's moving back and forth
and
folding. Yeah.
And now with social media and like the internet, it's like you could be influenced by cave painting or an Indonesian, basket weaver more than somebody you see in art history. I don't know.
I think of it as like the hinge moment.
That's a good way to put it.
It's always. I think it was in one of these where I kind of actually brought it up. Yeah, the monk one. It was actually inspired by these amazing storytellers in Mexico City. The hinge moment hits after midnight from deep sleep, remembering pilgrimages past and how those halves of my shell fit inexplicably, perfectly connected to the ancient past of an ancient city. Do I feel at home because here the past is alive and legends meet our eyes beckoning. So it's that idea of a hinge, right?
That is amazing image.
Yeah,
that's great.
the timefold, and I'm sure there's many philosophers and physicists who have theorized and talked about the nature of time and its nonlinearity and complexity. But yeah, I think if we can re-examine, rethink our models, and that the canon isn't exclusionary, but it is infinitely expanding, and it serves a certain, maybe the term is still useful, possibly.
Sure. And I mean, if the term, maybe there's even another term that can be, I don't know, I don't have a problem with it, actually. I guess it does imply.
I don't like the implication of there's a outside, and an inside, and
right.
You have to get it. It's like a gallery, like it's not just about getting a gallery representation. You can show in your garage, or you can show on.
I really was convinced that if I could get a gallery in LA, that my life would be made, not just in art, but period.
Yeah.
I really believed it.
Because we're goal based.
Yeah.
We're sort of, funneled into that.
I actually I do not blame people for feeling that way, because I still partially feel like that right now. I don't really, but I want to show in my hometown. I want a galleries here. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
But I also don't think it means I'm an artist or not, if I have one or not.
Exactly. I think that's back to our idea of opening up, the poetic form as
sure.
many things,
right.
as a tag, or as a rap song, or as something written, or something spoken, or
yeah.
as a conversation.
Yeah.
And I do. It doesn't deplete things of meanings to open up and expand the forms, like the canon or the poem or the song. I think it just keeps energizing them.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. I think that, for example, even in my classroom, I'm doing this project where I'm having them make memes, but I have a student who really wants to learn how to draw classically in like a very traditional way for his memes or for his pieces. They don't have to be memes, but whatever, collages or pieces. And so I've actually been basically giving him super traditional tutorials.
Wow.
Every class, at the end of every class, for a half an hour. I'm staying after class for him, which I'm happy to do.
Yeah.
And so I'm basically giving him a figure drawing class.
Yeah.
On top of his design class. And I think that is very useful information for him, because he wants it, and he wants it so he can say what he wants to say.
And he knew that he wanted it.
And he knows he wants it. And so I am not against. I think people think that because I'm interested in breaking down barriers, that I want to destroy tradition. And I do not feel that way.
Oh, I know the artists that you love include Rembrandt and Bosch.
Well, I wouldn't say they include them. I would say that is the actual. Like, if you made me choose, a time period, if I could only have one time period, I would choose the 15th century.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's better, but I would choose it because that's what I love the most. I would choose Northern European painting specifically.
Bruegel,
Bosch, Bruegel, and Van Eyck and Van der Waal. Before Bruegel. I love Bruegel, but by the way, there's a Taschen Bruegel book with everything that he ever did in it. It's $60. And I shouldn't buy it, but I go get it today.
Tell the library, order it.
No, fuck that. I want my own copy so I can throw it away if I want to. I'm kidding about that.
No, you're in a book adding moment, but
so now this time we're not going to run out of time. So this is what I think might be nice if you're up for it.
Sure.
Pick one more poem to read, and that's how we'll close.
Okay.
And thank you. So we will close after this. Thank you all for tuning in, and this will be archived on YouTube and on my Instagram position. So Joanna Roche reading one of her poems from the book is
Then Now If.
Then Now If.
Let's see.
No, yeah, we have plenty of time, so take your time in the choice.
Okay. So since we've been talking about lost outlines and new poetic forms, and why I still love Joseph Cornell after so many decades, I'll read this one. Ode to the Last Outline, or What I Learned from Joseph Cornell. Look at objects across history. What has Cornell thought? To look inside, to connect, to cross time for those we love, to see objects as beyond things, to meanings. Reckoning objects we glimpse beyond, save, recover, reignite. New uses and understandings between old and now. What stays is so dear and soon departed. The histories of forgotten lives and loves, and sometimes art, bring my tears into motion, into time to speak.
Beautiful, thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.